Hey, welcome to another Most Immortal Ad panel. With me today is Laura Gregory, founder of Great Guns and Immortal Awards 2020 juror. And we are both very excited to be joined by Joe Sedelmaier, a true industry icon and legendary director who's responsible for a quite incredible body of work, pioneering comic advertising in the 20th century. So Joe and Laura, welcome. Lovely to have you both here.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
The reason you are both here is because, Laura, you selected Steerage, a classic 70s ad for Southern Airways, which Joe directed. You've selected that as your most immortal ad. So we'll start off with a nice, easy one, I guess. And of all the ads that you could have picked from, why did you pick Steerage as your most immortal?
Well, I picked Steerage because I was sitting at the start of lockdown. And when you asked me, I always wanted I thought everybody should see something funny. And I have a little folder of Joe's work on my computer desktop that I turn to when I have a slightly low time. He's like my therapist, only I've never ever met him before until now. And I thought Steerage was so relevant because we were all sitting there wondering if we were ever going to fly again. And we're still wondering if we're ever going to fly again.
And if you do.
Yeah. But also when I was young and I was starting my company, you know, Joe was like, oh my God, everyone talked about him everywhere you went. At my first can, he was winning all these lions, and everyone loved his work. Everybody was trying to imitate it, and nobody could. It was a total disaster. So I just thought I wanted to show people something that maybe they hadn't seen before. You know, especially this new group of young directors all coming up that had not enjoyed the richness of Joe's work, and for them to rediscover him. So that's why I chose Steerage, and there you go.
Well, I guess we're talking nearly 50 years on from when it was first launched. And Laura, you mentioned that it's a comic masterpiece in the write-up that you did. But Joe, did you realise at the time that you were onto something quite so good with this one?
Well, you go into things, you want to make it the best, you want to do the best, and you have a very positive outlook. I mean, you think, hey, first of all, I got a call from Tom Little, who had this small agency in Atlanta, Georgia. And they were pushing one-class service. And they came up with this idea. This guy gets on, as we see, gets on first class, his coach ticket. And there's all this bacchanal of great food, fantastic, whatever. And the works, yes, the works. And she says, you know, second cabin, please. And in he goes, and it's Steerage. By the way, the original title was Orgy, and it was from the first part. But anyhow, the thing is, when I heard this story, I thought, oh my God, what I can do with this. And he had a small agency, and he had an art director he just hired from New York, who wouldn't begin until about it was like a couple days before the shoot. And so anyhow, I went ahead. We were awarded the spot. I went ahead. I cast it. I got all the people. I got the costumes. I had the sets built. I worked with Jim Hayes, who did a lot of my sets in the beginning. We got this all set up, and in comes the art director, and he takes it and he said, "Oh my God, Sedelmaier, they're never going to buy this. This is a small airline in Georgia, and this is the first time they're getting into commercial. I mean, they're not. No way." Well, by this time, the hell with it. I'd already had everything going. We're going ahead with it. And Tom Little back in Atlanta, he said, "Go ahead with it, Joe. Whatever you do, you know." So I did, and I was like a black cloud during the whole shoot, and even during the editing. And then the day came when the clients were coming in, and it was two Southern guys. And they were like something almost out of a cliche shot of some Southern guy Yeah, what do you got going there? Let's take a look. And so we showed it to them. They laughed. That's a funny shot. Let's go with it. And out they went. And that was it. You think back about that and you think that could have gone the other way too.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that you have in the business. But if I listen to this guy, he made complete sense too when he said they're not going to buy this. I mean, it was reasonable. A small airline, they've never made any commercials there, and so, but it was a pivot point for me as far as doing comedy commercials. I started in a business in 1967, and I was 34 years old, and I wanted to do comedy. I wanted to do comedy. I've always loved comedy. I mean, you can make me laugh, you're terrific. But anyhow, you push along. You do the Kellogg's. You do there's Kellogg's, and there's was it the Jolly Green Giant, Jello? I mean, on and on. And it was good money, but it wasn't anything. Anyone could have done this with some talent, but it wasn't memorable. There was nothing. You'd spend a morning deciding whether the peas should go to the top of the plate or the bottom of the plate. And it's like, what the hell is this all about? The Jello commercials, they were successful, but you had lines like, "Hey Mom, what's for dinner?" "We're having Jello brand gelatin." Brand gelatin? You say that to your kid? At the end, the dad's sitting there after dinner, and he takes a scoop of the Jello and he says, "Honey, you are a great cook." And she looks at him, and then she looks at the camera, and she said, "Well, I had a little help." I mean, this was the stuff I was doing comedy, but it was unintentional comedy. And what you do is you keep pushing. And as I said before, you find people that are on your level, or they find you. And I think the pivotal point was 7 years later that I did this Southern Airways commercial, that I decided I was committing myself to just really doing comedy. And by that time, I had those people that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And you build on that.
Yeah. So you'd amassed this group of actors that you...
The what?
This group of actors, you'd grown this group of actors.
I enjoyed doing what I did, but I was totally involved from the beginning. The casting, not just the direction, but the camera work. I've always done my own camera work. And the editing, I had my own editor. I was a small operation, but I had my own editor, and I was there not only for the editing, I was there for adding sound effects and things like that. The mixes, things happen all the way along, and you want to be there. And that's the fun of it. And without that, I talked to there were a couple directors saying, "Well, I shoot it a certain way. They can only cut it a certain way." That's bullshit. And it's another thing was, "Well, Sedelmaier, you could be making a lot more, if you went out. My God, you're there with the editing, you're doing a lot. You could be out doing other jobs." I did fine, and I did well, and I'm still healthy, and I'm happy. So there you go.
I noticed on one of your jobs, the editor was credited a lady named Peggy.
Yes, Peggy DeLay. She was my editor almost from the beginning.
Wow.
Peggy and it's like, it's so important, the editing, and the editor worked for me, with me. But I mean, it's important. So often they say, well, some of these directors, the casting would be done basically. Then the director would be given a choice of 3 or 4 people. He'd pick that, he'd shoot it and direct it, and he's out on another job.
Yeah.
To me, that's That's not fun. You
Yeah.
got to have fun. I mean,
tell me.
and you can do it, but
It's
you
all
can
about
find
fun.
Yeah, and I figure that's where you spend the most hours of your life.
Yeah.
But I want some compensation at the end of the day, and
Mm.
say, you know, I don't like you got so much of the, hey, Sedelmaier, it's only a commercial, or you know, you can well, let's face it, the only reason we're in this business is to get out on that boat. I didn't have a boat. I don't have a boat. I don't care about boats. I'm not into golf. It's just, this is where you are. This is what you do. And looking back, I feel very fortunate. And I kept a lot of my interpositives. And if I hadn't, you wouldn't have been watching some of the stuff you're watching now.
No, it's all been remastered, Joe. Was it all remastered?
Oh, I had it remastered twice.
Yes.
You know, Betacam came out and I had it all remastered.
Yeah.
Then later on, you had the high definition. It's been, in fact, you know what? I'll send you a Blu-ray of a lot of the work.
Oh, great.
And you watch that on the big screen. And
yeah, amazing.
But that's, it's just technology made it so possible. I don't think we'd be talking. Well, for sure, we would not be talking today without technology.
No, we wouldn't. Tell me about technology. There's so many visual effects now, and would you change the way you direct comedy now with all the visual effects, or would you still work with people and visual gags?
Oh, it's working with people. The story is about people. And nothing against, listen, I closed the studio, it's almost 25 years ago, but things were happening then. And things that you could do. I would have, I remember there's a shot I had of a little boy and this big dog, this little dog sitting next to him. It was this Mexican dog, the Chihuahua? Chihuahuas. They're always shaking. And he's sitting next to the boy, and on the other side is this big dog. And the little dog looks up at the big dog and goes, "Ruff!" And the big dog backs off. Now, I could never have done that without the new technology. I stripped it down. I had the little dog bark at someone who was right next to it, crop him out, put in the big dog. It's absolutely, perfect.
Seamless.
And it looks like there's so many things you can do. Yeah. Today with film, there isn't anything you can't do, but it still goes back to that human situation. Yeah. It's the story, it's the people, and the comedy, the humor. When I started in the business, there was this thing there was East Coast humor, New York humor. There was Middle America humor, which was Chicago. And then there was West Coast humor. That's bullshit. That was nonsense. There's a universal humor. I mean, look, I worked in Britain, which was a wonderful experience. I worked with Tim Delaney, who's brilliant. Yeah. And I went with John Webster. And then again, you can talk about British humor, you can talk about Italian humor, French humor. There's universal humor. Yeah. And I realize we have our regional humor, and we have our Jerry Lewis. You had your Norman Wisdom, but you also had Cleese and Monty Python, which was totally universal. Yeah. And the same with as I say, I worked in Britain, I worked in France, I worked in Italy, and I worked with the Germans. I still haven't found out the German sense of humor, but they seem to like what I was doing, and that's all that counts. So there you go.
Yeah.
So basically, when Laura picked this, she said that your work captured the attention of the public, and we just talked about this in the breakthrough style of observation, and that you basically created a whole genre of comic advertising that nobody's ever been close to getting to, which is quite a big statement. So I'm just curious to how seeing Joe's work went on to affect yours and influence yours, Laura.
Well, you know, I think in the biggest sense of the word, it told me that I probably couldn't do comedy because, and actually as a company, we've never done a lot of comedy because I could never find a director that made me laugh in the way that you made me laugh. And that's, you know, probably very much my own sense of comedy is very similar to the type of work that you do. And, you know, my favorite movie is Being There. To me, that's the most beautiful.
Oh, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
Absolute brilliant movie.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt because you're talking.
No.
But at the end of that movie, Sellers was brilliant, and it's a great movie, no doubt about it. But why did he put that thing in at the end when he's walking on water? The man had nothing going on up here. He was not a Christ-like figure. Why did they put the book? I thought they could never do this, turn this into a film. Well, I was wrong. I mean, Peter Sellers, only Peter, was brilliant.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were talking
Yeah,
about
anyway, so, you know, I guess it influenced me because it talked to me about casting is king, and casting is king. And that I think was the biggest takeout, apart from your work being my personal therapist, as I told you earlier, because it always makes me laugh. But I can, you know, for me, in a short amount of time, that you could actually tell such a story with virtually, you know, no crazy big sets and props. I mean, Fashion Show was different. That was a big set, you know, a lot of people. But, you know, Fast Talking Man and Where's the Beef? The sets almost, you don't even notice them. You have to watch them again to notice what you're seeing. It's amazing. All about your casting.
Yeah, well, casting is, look, you can have the best idea in the world. You can have the best photography, the best direction, the best whatever. But if the casting isn't right, forget it. And I think you see this in films. If you've seen Maltese Falcon, which I think is a terrific film, it was made 3 times. And basically, the dialogue was pretty much the same story. But the first 2 were absolutely forgettable. The one with Bogart that John Huston did was brilliant. You can see it over and over. And it's too often, I think, they get into what is the idea? The idea is important. Okay, tell me, what is the idea? What is the idea in Where's the Beef? I don't know. What's the idea? It's our beef. We have more beef on the banana. I'm thinking about slipping on the banana. Anyhow, it's like we have more beef than any other company. That's basically what they're selling.
Yeah.
And it's that's not an idea. That's a premise. But that's okay. I mean, again, it's what people remember is important. And it's as I say, you don't just see that commercial once. You see it over and over and over. Yeah. And today we're at the point where we can zip through things. When I was still in the business, and when I was younger even, I somehow, commercials, I'd be looking, when a commercial would come on, I'd be looking straight at it, and all of a sudden I'd click off, and I'd be thinking about something else until the show came back on.
Yeah.
And
well, it's when people make the tea. You go and make the tea unless something great is on.
Yeah. So
we talk we touch on there like a variety of ads there in Where's the Beef. We've talked about Steerage. We've got Fast Talking Man. We're obviously talking about Steerage, which is why we're here. But where does Steerage sit for you, Joe, in your incredibly expansive body of work? Or do you have a favorite child as such? Do you have a favorite ad you've made?
Well, it's one of my favorites. It was certainly a pivotal point. And I love the commercial. I mean, I like the commercial very much. But I think later on, I think of commercials like The Fast Talking Man, and I think about dialogue and how, as I said before, the comedy doesn't come from the page; it comes from the execution. And you take The Fast Talking Man, where you have lines in it like, "Can you wait 12 seconds? Can you wait 15 seconds? Can he wait 15 seconds?" And you cut to the secretary saying, "Can you wait 15 seconds?" And the man says, "I'll wait 15 seconds." That's not funny. But the way it's cut together, it's very funny. And too often, the comedy is written in the script. So when I had my ill-fated whatever with Hollywood, that I got out of it, thank God, in time. But I kept getting these scripts that, "Joe, you're going to love this script. It is a fun read." I don't want a fun read. I want a story. Tell me, what's the story? And it's like, give me a synopsis. They never wanted to do this. It was always in the script. And that's just not the way I work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's all in the story.
Yeah.
While we're on, I guess, comedy, what we've noticed with the Immortal Awards and the work that won last year, particularly compared to the year before, was that there was a distinct lack of comedy that won at the awards. And there were comments in the jury room about the work being made as a reflection of society. So what does that say about the era, really, in which these ads were made, and that there was a lot more comic advertising?
I don't see any difference. A lot of what's called comic advertising is what I would call cute. It's I don't see that much difference. I mean, you have times you have terrific stuff coming out, and then it levels off. It depends. It's more, I talk about a reflection of society. Sometimes I think that the tail wags the dog. I don't know. It's like, Laura, what do you think? What?
Well, I think maybe I think people go through trends, and there's sometimes a bit more comedy, and sometimes there's a bit more big special effects stuff out there. I don't think it really reflects that people are sad or happy. I think it just reflects what brands think they want to spend money on. And I think it also reflects that there are not a lot of people out there globally writing really amazing comedy. And
I do. You talk about that. I think, going back about comedy again, I think it's very important. It starts at the top. In doing Federal Express, oh my God, I can't think of his names now. He was the client. He was there every day on the shoot. I love that. He was with it. He was on that wavelength. Now, I think I did the Alaska Airlines work, and the client was John Kelly, and he was on the set all the time. He was in the pre-production. I love that, because it's like he could make the decisions. So often I would get things that, well, John doesn't like this, John doesn't like that. We have this script now. This John really likes this script. And I said, well, we're going to have a pre-production meeting. Let's talk about it. And John, and they'd say, John is difficult. Well, I said, I don't find him that difficult. I mean, he said, well, he likes you. Well, the reason he liked me is because I didn't bullshit him. It's so important that, and it's so wonderful, because things can happen on the set that you haven't planned for. You can be in a pre-production meeting and say, well, I'm going to do this, or you've got to be very selective about what you say. But it happened in doing the Alaska Airlines. Every so often I'd be in a situation on the set where I'm thinking, this is not working. And I could look at John and say, John, this is not working. What if we did? It's like, oh my God, you wouldn't say that to say it's, and so often you have an idea, you talk about something that happens, about what you're going to do in a pre-production meeting. You get on the set and all of a sudden the actor says something that he either mups it up or whatever. And I think, God, that's better than what I was talking about. And originally you had some of these clients would say, but Joe, that's not what you said you were going to do. I'm saying, for Christ's sake, this is much better than what I had. Things happen. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, in being there for those things when they happen.
Yeah. I think there's been a big move where clients are so far removed from what we're doing, and especially now with COVID, you know, people are directing on a monitor like we're talking now. And there's
I know. I hear that, yes.
That's tough. That's really tough.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But again, you know, I'm thinking about 10-second commercials. And so often in the beginning, I would get a storyboard, a 10-second commercial where it said, slow reveal to, or slow dotted to reveal or whatever. But in doing 10-second spots, I mean, I did a few that really worked out. The one for Robinson's commercial where this woman's sitting behind this very elegant table. And she said, you're probably wondering where I found this divine whatever dining set. And she lifted, and the whole table goes, she lifts the whole table over, it slams down, and on the back it says Robinson's. I got it at Robinson's. It's all of this elegant stuff going on around. And she's sitting there. And by the way, she was a writer that I knew when I was at J. Walter Thompson. And I'd hear her going up and down the hall, say, oh, my dear, so good to see you again. Oh, and I thought, Jesus, this gal. But then after I was when I started, I thought of Maggie, and she had a great sense of humor. And I said, hey, Maggie, I'd like to get you, would you do this? And she did. This is stuff that people, they have all their lives. It's something inside of them, and pulling that out you might have to work a little longer and harder, but when you get it, you get something that's choice. Yeah, because in a commercial, there's no time to build character. It's got to be there.
Instant, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do that every time. That's what I was saying about, you know, the sets being minimal, is that you actually don't even notice them because you're watching and listening.
Well, I also had, in the beginning, was, Sedelmaier, you never move the camera. Why don't you move well, there's nothing to move. I'm in on this. I mean, I move the camera, but that's not what it's all. I usually find when there's more movement in the camera, there's less really going on. It seems like more is going on. And it's got to come from the situation. It's well, I wish you were around when I was younger. But I mean, working with the British was a great experience. That's interesting. You talk about actors, that they are into the role, whether it's a commercial, whether it's a film, or what I'm talking. Now, this is 20 years ago, but still, it was a different experience than than here in the States. And not only that, but they were so respectful of the director. I thought, my God, I was going loaded for bear, and they were wonderful. They wanted your input.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't much street casting, 20, 30 years ago. There was less. Most of the actors were trained and came on. There's a lot more street casting now, and a lot more real people who are which is. The characters that you would collect were the real people who, they're tough, but as you say, when you get them, they're magic.
Yes, and the whole thing was having these Polaroids. I just piles of them, and I would go through them, and then I would have them come in for a casting session, and I was very fast. I didn't sit them down, read this, read that.
Yeah.
I usually gave them lines that weren't even in the commercial to
Yeah.
see how they reacted. And that was, you knew you were in trouble. And I know, especially in Hollywood, when I first went out there, an actor would come in and say, "Oh, whoa, boy, you look like a happy bunch of people. What are we?" And I thought, "Oh boy, we're in big trouble." I mean, it's like, just come in, just, be yourself. Yes, it's. But there had some great people out there, and I found the other thing I found that was not. I found great crews wherever I went, whether it was in London, whether it was in Italy, the producers in Italy were unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't talk to the director. This was even the client. It's like, wow, I've never had anything like that before. So
that's funny. Yeah.
Last time out, I sat and spoke to Sir John Hegarty, and we were talking about Johnny Walker's The Man Who Walked Around the World. Laura, I believe that you've got a question for Joe for Sir John.
I have. John, I was talking to John about having a chat with you this week, and I said, "What would you like to ask Joe?" And he said, "Just ask Joe, why did he stop?"
Why what?
Why did he stop?
Oh, why did I stop making commercials?
Yeah.
You know what? There comes a time in your life, you're a long way from that, but there comes a time in your life when there are other things that you want to do besides. Like, I had a film that I'd worked on before I went in, when I went into the business, working on a feature, and then I had to set that aside. I had it on 35 millimeter. I looked at it, I said, "There's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't work, but there's a lot of stuff that does work. Like, I'd like to really finish this thing." That was one thing. It's just, there is a time when, and especially when they talk, well, you get into your 80s and you keep that. Oh, listen, I keep my excitement, but names drive me nuts. It's like, again, we were just talking a minute ago, there's some name that I couldn't think of, a character or whatever. You can't do that when you're still in the business. It's little things that happen to you. Age. Now, I'm still fine. I'm not in it. I'm still, I love what I'm doing, what I have, but it's making, that's another time of your life. Yeah. And I loved what I did. Don't get me wrong. And I saved it. And I think I was probably the only director that did save his work. And there's a reason for that. and now it's so nice to hear people talk about it and what you go through when you do it. Well, but life goes on.
Sure does.
We are.
Sure does. You've left us a happy legacy.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful when I hear comments like that coming from people like you, Laura. It really is. It's terrific.
If Laura hadn't picked this ad, we wouldn't be here now, which kind of brings me nicely along to my last question then, was that, as you say, we're talking about work that is over 40 years old, part of this huge body of work. So it must have something about it. Laura, you're judging with us this year. If you were to see Steerage entered into this year's Immortals, how do you think it would fare?
Wow.
People would go crazy. We need that remastered version, Joe, and we'll just put it in there.
Yeah, right. I can imagine if that would run today. First of all, it's like there isn't first class anymore, so you can't parody that. It's all steerage. It's all one class, and really, first class is actually peanuts with salt, and it's just more legroom and not that much more legroom. I don't know. It's a historical piece of work, really. Now
it's a great piece of work. It's a classic. It's a classic for an intercontinental travel. that does, where there are still grades. I know in all America, but you know, where we're flying across, we'd love to fly business, you know, and there still is that.
Oh my God, yes, I remember that. Oh my God, you go upstairs 747, all you wanted, go downstairs. First class was absolutely fantastic.
It still is relevant.
Oh yeah.
It is still relevant especially to the European travelers who come to America.
Yeah. Well, I think let me ask you this, is it relevant because we actually don't have it anymore? I'm talking about, you know.
In the way it was conceived, yeah. I guess so.
Yeah, in the way it was conceived. You're right. You're right. It's a little like sometimes looking at a W.C. Fields film, like The Bank Dick. I laugh myself silly every time I watch that. And yet I wonder how that would relate to someone today. And I don't know, because then I think back about Laurel and Hardy, and I think about Chaplin, by the way, who all came, Laurel and Chaplin came from Britain.
That's right.
And well, so much has come from Britain.
Yeah.
And as far as comedy goes, I mean, Sellers was so brilliant because he played everything straight. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what's funny. I mean, if you're aware that something's funny, you're not. I mean, slipping on a banana peel, talking about bananas a few minutes ago, it's like slipping on a banana peel is not funny. What makes it funny is pretending you didn't. I mean, it's anyhow, there you go.
Guys, we have very, very unfortunately run out of time.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it, and talking with you, and Laura, you're fantastic.
Oh,
and really, and Paul, putting this whole thing together, it's a great idea. Of course, I'm thinking of it very subjectively, but it's terrific. Well, thank you again. It's been terrific.
It's a pleasure.
You've been great.
Cheers,
okay, Joe.
Stay safe, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Second cabin, please.
Southern Airways believes that no man should be subjected to the indignity of being labeled or treated like a second-class citizen. Which is why, when you get on a Southern jet...
Hi, Mr. Gill. Sit anywhere you like.
You'll find no curtain separates the peasants from the nobility. No one takes the legroom from you and gives it to someone else. On Southern, there's only one class of service, and it isn't second.